need far less of an introduction than I do. But I think we're going to get a little bit into their background and to learn more about them as we go through our conversation. So Brent and Josh, welcome to Spectrum and our afternoon interview.
Oh, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. We really respect everything that all of you do. And we're just thrilled to be a part of it today.
And please be interactive and ask questions, and we'd love to chat with everyone.
Yeah, it makes my job easier.
Yeah.
So now I will tell you, I have no air conditioning in my house. So as I melt into a puddle, just please excuse. We're very old school in this old house, unfortunately. So I wanted to say happy 8th wedding anniversary to you. I understand that you had a wedding anniversary this week, right, on June 28th. So congratulations. That is quite an accomplishment. And you had an interesting way of celebrating that occasion this week. Tell me about this 24-hour Let Love Bloom extravaganza that you had at your home.
Yeah, well, we, we're always looking for ways to engage our community and the greater community. And we had been working with an artist out of Brooklyn named Tom Fruin, who creates these amazing light sculptures, most often recognizable when he does these stainless, stained glass water towers on buildings in New York City.
If you've ever gone from the airport into the city, you've seen the stained glass water tower, and that's what he's known for. So he brought a temporary sculpture that was installed on our property.
And so we decided that since we were going to have this beautiful sculpture, we would have weddings to celebrate the Supreme Court decision, which also happened to correspond with our own wedding anniversary. So we opened up the slots for people to get married on the farm inside this rainbow cathedral. And we ended up having about 30 couples come for the day to exchange their vows. And it was just a really, really beautiful event.
And what an amazing way not only to celebrate the Supreme Court decision in a beautiful way, but also to, allow people from your community to come to your home and to also celebrate the work of this artist. It was kind of a win-win for everybody. I was watching a video of a couple that came, a man and a woman. I think the wife had Alzheimer's disease and the husband was stricken with cancer. I mean, it's really could be a very tragic tale, and yet the video didn't feel that way at all. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many wonderful stories of the day. Every couple was so diverse and so interesting. In this couple, they had been married, I'm not sure how many years, but a fairly long time. And there's always a dog. She's either she has a squeaky toy or the dog
Well, bring her over. She can play with my dog.
And so they were married a long time, and she has early onset Alzheimer's, and he was just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And they were shopping in our store in Sharon Springs a few weeks ago, and there was a baby goat there. And he said it was the most he'd seen her like herself since the diagnosis. And so he said, we'd love to take part in this wedding and renew our vows. So they did. And it was sweet. Mm-hmm. It was just lovely. I mean, every couple was lovely. Our entire team, which volunteered for the day, everyone went home in tears all day.
And they were also a really great example, because even though an example of inclusivity, because even though we had promoted the event as part of our Pride celebration, I would say at least a third of the couples ended up being more traditional couples. And for us, that was really important because, it just showed that there is no definition of love or who can love something, or if you celebrate one type of love, you can't also appreciate and celebrate all kinds of love. And so just by having so many different couples come through the event, it really did show how unifying and how inclusive love can and should be.
And I think it personalizes the tagline of love is love, right? It just
Yes.
is love, you know, it doesn't matter who you are. It sounds amazing. So, you know, one of your famous phrases is hello, neighbor. And it's so recognizable to people as being part of who you are. And it reminded me of the Robert Frost poem, Mending Walls, where that famous line of good fences make good neighbors. And the neighbor in the poem is suggesting that it's important that we respect property and ensure privacy. And basically it's mind your own business. And Frost asks in the poem, if before I build the wall, what am I walling in or what am I walling out? And in your business and the community, you know, you've really focused on the concept of neighbors. And Josh, I think you have said, we believe that we'll never, ever go wrong as long as we treat every single person like they're our next door neighbor. So what do you think about the concept in that poem and what they're saying? And do fences make good neighbors, or are there barriers to communication?
I think that's a great observation. What are you keeping in and what are you keeping out? Because in our situation, in most businesses, and same in education, it's, you know, it's the business and the customer, and that's how they always think of it, as two separate things, and, you know, and a fence between them. And same in education, it's, you know, teachers and learners. And when we started our business, the idea of calling our customers neighbors wasn't some grand marketing scheme. It was the fact that we started making soap around our dining room table with our neighbors during the recession, trying to save our farm. We took in our neighbor who had goats and started making these products. And so not only were our first employees our neighbors, but they were also our first customers. And we grew, we had no money for marketing, so we grew by word of mouth, neighbor by neighbor by neighbor. So that line was blurred. You know, they were on Team Beekman, but they were also customers. And so the word neighbor applied to both. And I think in a lot of dichotomous situations, education, you know, business, whatever, if you stop thinking about us and them and just start thinking about all of us together, bigger things can happen. And that's shows itself in our business. We call all of our customers neighbors. They call themselves neighbors. They call themselves part of the Beekman neighborhood. And as we've grown, many small companies, as they've grown, they get sort of accusations of selling out or, you know, getting too big for their britches or whatever. In our case, because our neighbors felt like they were part of the company and it was one big neighborhood, they celebrated as we grew. If we signed a deal with Target, they thought it was amazing. If we signed a deal with Ulta, they were like, yes, they were congratulating themselves for growing the company. So I think that's a great observation, breaking down these walls of us and them and just, you know, just being us makes bigger things possible.
Yeah, it's community, right?
Yes, yeah.
So maybe let's get to know our neighbors. Brent, you are listed in Wikipedia as a physician, a business person, and a farmer in that order. Is that how you would have listed yourself?
Maybe not now, but yes, all three of those apply.
You'll have to go in and edit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would change about that now?
I think I would just change everything to kind person. You know, we get so associated with, you know, who we are, what our credentials are, what we've accomplished. But I think that, you know, if we're getting to the point where we're starting to think about what's on our tombstone, I think just kind person would be what I'm aiming for at this point in my life.
You know, it's funny that you say that because I'm a certified life coach of all things in addition to everything else. And one of the things I used to ask clients to do is to write their obituary and, you know, to really think about what they want the world to know about them. And for a lot of people in the end, that's kind of the conclusion that they came to, that all the stuff was not that important. It's just, you know, who they are as a person that ends up resonating with them. Now, you've had a fairly untraditional path that actually started out pretty traditionally. Can you describe your journey?
To where, you mean professionally or emotionally?
Yeah,
Or?
sort of. You grew up, in small town North Carolina and went to
Yes.
college, like did kind of the usual, and then
Yeah,
at some point you veered off that path.
Yeah, I did grow up in a very rural environment in rural North Carolina, and grew up evangelical, and went to college and medical school in North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and had a very traditional upbringing, and then after I finished medical school, came to New York City, and to do my residency at Columbia. And then after Columbia, went to Mount Sinai Hospital to do my fellowship, and then to NYU to do my MBA. And then after that, went to work at Martha Stewart to head up her health and wellness division. And that was what led to the 2008 recession when, I lost my job at Martha Stewart. My division of the company folded, and we had just purchased this farm and had a huge mortgage. And we had taken in, as Josh said, a neighbor who was losing his farm and brought his animals to our farm to graze. And that's really just how life took us.
Or as my mother says, I met a doctor and married a goat farmer.
She still kind of worked out well, though, in that way.
Yes.
But Brent, what's interesting too is you sort of glossed over, well, I went to work for Martha Stewart, but that was sort of, also an interesting story about how you even got involved with her and her company.
Yeah. So, when I was working on faculty at Mount Sinai, there had long been, our dog is very interested in the conversation. We had
He's welcome to join.
But we had long been trying to develop a center for the study and care of older patients, older adults. And it had just been kind of languished because in academic medicine, the study and care of older adults is not a sexy field. And so anybody who was donating money to the institution, who wanted their name on a building, were not interested in being associated with older adults. They wanted to be associated with cardiothoracic surgery or dermatology or some other field. And so I was tasked with trying to develop this idea for the center and to find a donor for the center. And so before I could approach any donors, I thought, well, I'm going to have a really great design for this center. And so I made kind of a list of all of the star architects I could think of. So any architect whose name would be familiar to people. And I.M. Pei was on my list. And so I wrote him a letter and said, I'm working on this idea for this center for the study of older adults and aging. Would you be interested in helping us design this center? And at the time he was in his 80s. And I made the appeal that, what we want to demonstrate that as you get older, you can still be incredibly functional and productive, and popped it in the mail. And a few days later, I got a phone call from I.M. Pei's office. And he said, I love this idea. I would love to work on this with my son. And so we worked together and came up with this beautiful plan for the facility.
So then he needed someone to fund it. And one of the people that came to mind was one of his idols, and it was Martha Stewart, somebody who was aging well and was like super productive and super involved. And at the time, she had just gone to jail. And there was an article in New York Magazine about, it was kind of a spoof or a silly article about where to send Martha Stewart a care package. And it had her address, federal prisoner number blank, 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 at Alderson Prison. And Brent, it was like, she's the best donor. I've got her,
She
address.
needs to get mail.
Yeah, she needs mail.
And so I got, and the article, it said she was getting thousands of pieces of mail. And so I got a huge X-ray envelope from the hospital because I wanted it to stand out. And so I put my letter inside this huge envelope, popped it in the mail, And then about 4 weeks later, I got an email from her daughter that said, my mom read your letter and she would love to talk with you.
And so that's how it got funded.
Yeah.
But I think that was our first lesson in just, just go there. Like we all have so many sort of barriers in our mind, like, well, this is a great idea, but it'll never happen, or I can never do this. And one thing that Brent is great at is, he just doesn't take no for an answer. And he just asks anything, he if he wants something, he asks somebody for it.
Yeah.
Well, that's how this interview came about. We wouldn't take no for an answer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I would say, I think, in business, and even in working in a community, the secret to success, if you're going to make an ask of anybody for anything, is to first think to yourself, what is in it for them. And so when you make your appeal, say, I'm asking this favor, or I'm asking this of you, but here's what I'm going to give to you in return. And I think that's always important before you make the ask, because if you have thought ahead of time what's in it for them, and you make that appeal in the right way, then they're going to be so much more receptive to what you need to get from them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's a great story. So Josh, now we're going to focus on you for a couple of minutes. Your Wikipedia page describes you as a writer, a television personality, and a business person. Is that how you would have listed yourself, and in that order?
He would probably want to take out TV personality.
Yes, yeah. I would say writer first, even though I'm not writing presently, as Brent tells me every day. But over the last few years, we're probably business people first, because our company has been growing so quickly. That's gotten most of our attention. So I guess we'd have to go with business person. Oh, that's terrible. I don't want to think of myself as business person first.
Well, nice person comes first, of course.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So you apparently are from the Albany area, and you moved around quite a bit. How has that affected your outlook, the way you approach life? Did moving around when you were younger, Brent had a traditional, lived in the same place kind of growing up. How do you think that your experience may have affected the way you've lived your life?
That's a really interesting question, and I haven't really thought of that before. But I moved around a lot growing up. I shouldn't say a lot. Every 5 to 7 years, my dad worked for a corporation that moved him, and changed schools often, and
that could be hard.
Yeah, that was hard. It was difficult to be dropped down in the middle of nowhere. But I think that's affected me maybe in a couple of ways: a good way and a bad way. Good way, I can be dropped into any situation in life and sort of be somewhat comfortable and be like, okay, I'm going to figure this out, or I can figure it out. I've changed careers many times, and so I'm not afraid of the unknown. But on the other hand, I sort of have this built-in expiration of interest in things. So there's points in my career, and when I've been very successful, and I'm like,
done.
Oh, this has been 7 years. I need to move to a new school. So,
but it keeps things fresh.
Yes. Yeah.
One other thing I noticed in your bio is it describes you as being, quote, openly gay, which I thought was interesting. Is that something that you would have put in your bio? Do you think that's something that's important for people to know about you?
You know what? I think that's a vestigial idea of our culture. I think that was something that was important to point out, even as little as a decade ago. I don't think it matters as much now. But at the time, whoever, entered that Wikipedia thing, clearly there was something in culture that, I don't, there aren't many people left who are privately gay, I don't think.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I think there's certainly.
Well, I mean, when you're young and before you come out, yes, but.
Yeah, I don't think that now people necessarily would write that in their Wikipedia as whenever this was written. But, you know, we always feel that visibility is very, very important. And so if they're, if someone knows nothing else about you, you know, I think that is an important thing to say, particularly if you're someone who's of note or has, you know, has accomplished something, or, you know, I think visibility is really important.
But it's interesting in that
Maybe just gay and not openly
Yeah.
gay. You know.
I was very active in LGBT rights when I was younger, and then as I got older and life just started happening, you know, I became less of an activist. But we became more of an activist in a way because we were the first gay couple to have our own reality television series. And what was so interesting about that was we never talked about being gay or really the gay content on that television show. It was about us moving to this small community and starting a business. And I think that had so much more impact than any of the marches or protests or, you know, petitions that I partook in, because our show had these very traditional family values and was actually very popular in conservative households. And we always say, you know, we were middle America's gay best friend. You know, like in many of these small rural communities or conservative households who didn't deserve the title of being homophobic were nonetheless labeled with that by the wider media. And it was a great chance for them to be like, no, we love the show, we love the values, and we love the people, and you know, we want to be part of this too.
Yeah, they're our neighbors.
Yes.
They're like everybody else.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think it shows in the program.
Yes.
You know, it's just inclusive.
Yeah. Had we made every episode about us being a gay couple in a straight town, and you know, like nobody would have watched.
Well, and it would be somewhat of a parody in a way. Mm-hmm. You know, here it's just authentic. You are who you are. You're part of this community, and that showed through. You know, many of us choose a path, and we kind of stay on that path, you know, sort of the old school, you know, somebody goes into corporate life and they retire and get a pen at the end of it or a watch. You guys, you know, as I mentioned, sort of veered off that path at some point, and have really had a lot of kind of unconventional adventures in a somewhat conventional setting. A lot of people are afraid to change, you know, they're afraid of zigzagging. How have you negotiated that? You know, were there times of uncomfortability? I mean, you had no idea if this Beekman 1802 was going to be successful, and certainly not to the extent that it is. And I love the sweetgrass, by the way. But, you know, that was a huge undertaking. The Amazing Race. I mean, what, you know, led you to do things like that? Like, you know, what?
Yeah.
I think just not saying no.
Yeah, but I would say we're as afraid of change as anyone. We're not paralyzed by it. And desperation has been our motivator, really.
Mm.
You know,
your inspiration is desperation.
Yes. I mean, we lost when we both lost our jobs in the Great Recession, and we had just bought this farm thinking it was just going to be a weekend place, you know, from our city careers. It was desperation that led us to starting to make soap and trying to figure out how to do our own website and take our own photographs. We literally built it around our dining room table. So that was desperation that forced us to make that change. Yeah. The Amazing Race, I don't know.
Well, I think just, you know, I think so often people talk themselves out of opportunity, whereas we never immediately turn down anything. You know, so many times, you know, people, their first response is a no, where our first response is, let me think about it. And then, you know, figure out, you know, how we can make it beneficial and then say yes. So we never really say no to anything. We just figure out, okay, I'm going to say yes to this conditionally, so that I can figure out how to make this a win-win situation. You know,
so your obituary would read, he said yes.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Your obituary would be, he said yes. Well, now, when we look at The Amazing Race, for example, you were really the underdogs in that race, right? So it makes me think of like the tortoise and the hare. And you pulled it out at the very end. Most people would have given up at that point. And I'm sure that a lot of people watching the show said, we're going to write off those guys. What drove you to continue to think we can do this? You know, we're even though it looked like maybe you couldn't, you still went ahead and did it. Like, what's that about?
Yeah, well, you know, interesting thing about The Amazing Race is that, you know, when we were, I'll tell you the backstory of how we got on the race to begin with. We were, when our first cookbook came out, we were at the Santa Monica Library and doing a cookbook signing. And there was a woman who was in the audience who came up to get her book signed. And she was saying, every week, my next door neighbor comes over to my house and we watch the Fabulous Beekman Boys and we love the show. And she just kind of threw as an aside that she was the president of CBS reality TV.
Her neighbor.
Her neighbor. And this woman was very unassuming. You know, she was probably in her 70s and, you know, just you would think, well, why would the president of CBS reality TV be going to her house to watch our show? Just, you know, it defied logic. And so I said, well, if she's such a big fan, why aren't we on The Amazing Race? And she's like, I'll tell her. And, you know, we thought nothing of it. Because even at that point, with our little teeny bit of fame that the show had brought us, we'd already seen kind of the flip side of fame and like the types of people who, you know, come out with that. And so we thought nothing of it, but 2 days later, we were sitting here at the farm and the phone rang and they said, hi, we're calling from The Amazing Race. We heard you want to run the race.
But to Brent's earlier point about like, what is the opportunity in that, like say yes, you know, we immediately thought, okay, we're likely not going to win. Generally, like middle-aged gay couples do not win American reality. And we're not going to win. So why would we put ourselves through this? Our company, you know, company is growing, everything's happening. And we said, well, if we can make it halfway through, we will probably.
We didn't tell the producers this. This was our own.
If we can make it halfway through, we will probably have reached most of their audience. And, you know, we'll wear t-shirts with, you know, Beekman on it so people can find our company. And so we looked at that as like free marketing to 11 million people every week, really with no thought of winning.
We just wanted to make it halfway.
We were halfway.
And then after not that we weren't trying, like,
and
you really had to try to make it halfway.
If anybody watched it, you know, we barely made it. Like every leg, we were, you know, second to last, sometimes last and saved. But it was true. I'll admit it. I kind of wanted to give up because it was brutal and we were clearly not going to win at that point. It didn't look like it. And I knew that once you got kicked off, you went to a resort for the rest of the time, you know.
That seemed more appealing.
Lovely. And, you know, and Brent was like, no, let's do this. We're here and this has been given to us. Let's keep pushing through.
Well, I will say, and this is another backstory that we haven't often told, but it's alluded to a little bit in the show, and certainly the fandom of the show has picked it up. But when we were running the race and we had gotten down to the final 4 or 5 teams, there had been an alliance that formed among some of the other teams to get us out of the race. And there was, during the course of the race, a statement made that at the time, and certainly now, would be construed as a homophobic slur or slight. And when I heard that, it really did light a fire in my stomach. And I'm like, oh, so these teams think that because we are gay or we're not traditionally the strong athletic team in the race, that we shouldn't be in the final. And it really did light a fire in me. And I told Josh, who again was like, we've done our time. Let's stop. I'm like, no, we're going to finish this race and we're going to win this race.
I do remember a producer in the second leg of the race, you know, after there was one leg left, and the producer looked at us and said, why are you still here? and that was the fire that lit under me. I'm like, oh, well, we're still going to be here on the last day. And
Obviously, these are people who have never mucked out a stall or a barn, right? They don't know about strength.
exactly.
What did you find most challenging about that experience, other than, you know, these experiences of being kind of written off? Or
The most challenging in that is really, it was the amount of time, it was the travel, it was the stress. It's not the actual challenges that you see on TV, you know, falling off a cliff or, you know, whatever. Like, you know, CBS television isn't going to kill you, so you know you're pretty safe. But it was that long time of traveling, and that's actually where us being a couple for so many years really paid off. Was we communicated really well. We didn't break down with each other. We were able to handle the stress. And I think that's where we excelled over some of the other teams.
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, we've talked about neighbors and how we're all connected, and you talked about how you bought this farm right before the recession, and it's in a tiny little town. I mean, there's less than 600 people, right? So you pretty much know everybody. Everybody knows you. And did you know anybody there? Like, what led you to Sharon Springs and this particular farm?
We got lost.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a weekend getaway, and we were apple picking, and we got lost. And we drove into this town. There was one business on Main Street that had lights on, and it was a hotel restaurant. And so we stopped, and the owners of the hotel were gay. So we call them the gay pioneers. And they had renovated this hotel and opened it, and we fell in love.
It's wonderful. I've eaten there.
Oh yeah. So we fell in love with it. And it was on the way out of town that we found the farm. And again, with no concept of starting to become farmers or starting a business. It was literally, it's a lovely place. We're at a point in our career where we could afford a weekend getaway, and that's why we bought it. No idea that a year later we'd both be out of work.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Brent, you have some sense growing up in a small community what that's like, but did you have any sense of what this would be like moving into such a small community, and now you're kind of public figures? Like,
Well, when we moved here, I guess we did have some public, you know, profile because Josh had, you know, written a bestseller, and I was associated with Martha Stewart. You know, I think that the only thing that was on our mind when we moved here full time was how not to be perceived as outsiders, and how to really be a part of the community and give back in a positive way to the community. You know, because as some of you know, it's a very, you know, Schoharie County is a very rural county. It is a conservative county, very traditional values. And so we were very aware of our surroundings. Not that we felt fearful or unsafe or anything like that, but we wanted to make sure that we never came across as, you know, these two city guys who came here and they're going to tell us what to do, or they think they're better than us. And so we really did work very hard at the beginning to show our appreciation for the community, not only in terms of working with other artisans, working with other businesses to support their businesses as we were trying to grow ours, but really working with our agricultural neighbors. And when we were starting to raise chickens, you know, going to a neighboring farmer who had chickens and say, hey, can you impart your knowledge to us so that we can, you know, get started with chickens, or, you know, whatever we were trying to do. And I think that's just such a great example of how to make a community work, and how to make everyone in a community feel appreciated. Because at the end of the day, everyone just wants some acknowledgement that they bring something to the table, or that their life's work has something to a value that they can contribute. And so just that simple act of knocking on you know, a neighbor's door, and by neighbor I mean it's anywhere in the greater community, not necessarily our physical neighbor, and saying, hey, we heard that you're great at this. Yeah. Can you teach us how? And, you know, 100% of the time, people were willing to impart their knowledge upon us. And I think that's really, more than anything, what helped us integrate into the community, was that we acknowledged the contributions of everybody in the community.
And I think you really put your finger on it that it's not these two guys from the city coming, because I suspect they would be less concerned about you being a gay couple than you being city slickers. And I'm coming in to tell you because we do it better in the city, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge problem in America right now. I mean, just the word, you know, the elitists, you know, the elite coast, you know, that's the problem, is there's an inferiority complex among a large group of Americans that's really dividing the country. And and the inferiority complex is often because they're told they are lesser than. And that's the thing we've got to get rid of.
Did you feel coming into it, so at the beginning when you're first buying this farm, that you would be, in a sense, I know this other gay couple ran the hotel, but that you'd be sort of representing the LGBTQ community in a way?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know, we, as we said, we have always felt that visibility was very important, particularly as the profile of our business grew, or, you know, things like The Amazing Race happened. We knew that we became more and more visible. I'll remember when The Amazing Race was over and we were coming home, one of our neighbors, who, you know, I'm pretty sure also had a Trump flag in their, you know, ultimately had a Trump flag, had written on a big bed sheet, had painted with a spray can on their bed sheet, "Congratulations, Brent and Josh, you know, welcome home." And they had hung that on their porch. And it stayed there for weeks and weeks and weeks. And, you know, I think so much, you know, in the media portrays everybody, not gay and straight, black and white, and just the media dissects everybody and polarizes everybody into an extreme for the headline or for the soundbite. But that's not really what communities are like. I think different factions of communities can be stirred up and motivated by particular rhetoric to act in a certain way. But by and large, no matter how small of a town you're in, I just don't think that that's what communities are like. And I think that is one of the saving graces of America, and one of the optimistic ways to look at the social fabric in America.
Yeah, that's very true. And I wonder, because you grew up in a small town, especially in the South, if that sort of gave you a different preparation for moving to a place like this.
Probably. And I think, you know, having grown up evangelical and in that community and understanding what their values and motivations would be, certainly, I think so.
So, you know, talking about this sense of neighborliness and community that's really shining through everything that you do, it really extends beyond your immediate community. You know, you talk about like your customers also being your neighbors in a sense, but you do a lot to give back, not only to your immediate community, but to the community at large. For example, you had us up to the farm a couple of years ago for the SUNY's Got Your Back. And, you know, your amazing products going into this initiative, which has just helped innumerable sexual assault and domestic violence victims. You participate, you have the Harvest Festival. I was reading about the actress Mindy Cohn, who was ill, and, you know, you invited her up, this wedding thing. Like, you really seem to have to spend a lot of time thinking about what it means to be community in a way that I think a lot of us don't think as broadly about that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Community is very important to us. The idea of neighbors as something more than just the person right next to you is really important to, you know, the foundation of our company. You know, when we were starting out, you know, we had no marketing budget. So we were really dependent on creating a good product and someone using it, and then they told a neighbor about it, and then they told another neighbor about it. And so neighbors were very important to the growth of our business. But, you know, I think Josh has always very astutely talked about, you know, the 10 Commandments and love thy neighbor. And, you know, when that was written, the idea that, how do you explain it better than I do?
So that the word neighbor appears in like every religion, and sort of love thy neighbor is in most religions, throughout history. And the word neighbor actually does refer to people that you meet or people that you have a connection to. It's not love humankind as you love yourself. It's love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so we believe that in this world today, when we're inundated with issues, like Miami collapse, fire here, something happening in Europe, war in Afghanistan, we cannot comprehend or handle all of that. We can't take care of all of humankind. But
I can't solve all the world's problems.
But I believe the reason the word neighbor is in so many religions is because if we can take care of the people that we are connected to, and they take care of the person next to them, they take care of the person next to them, that's actually how humankind is taken care of. So even though we started with working directly with our neighbors, our customers, we have to have a direct contact with. We have to have festivals where they come and meet us. We have to work, we have to donate to their charities, so that they feel a connection. So just the idea of building a neighborhood that's larger than the people next to you, but you still have to be physically, or still have to be somehow connected to them. It's not just sending money off into a void, for charity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I also think that, because our company started in the midst of a recession, where we basically didn't just lose everything, we were lost everything and then had this huge mortgage that we had no idea how we were going to pay. I think that reset what our ideas of accomplishment would and should be. So I think, when we started the business, and even today, our personal goal is not to, be fabulously wealthy or, anything like that. Our goal is how many people's lives can we impact? How many other people can we make successful? How many employees can we hire? Those are our, KPIs are, that we personally look toward. And I think that comes from the way that the company was founded. And, those are the things that are important to us.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Schitt's Creek, everyone's favorite TV series. We were all bereft when we finished the series. That was my go-to pandemic viewing. So tell us about the collaboration with the show, the Rose Apothecary, how that came about, how they found you.
Well, I think anybody that watched the show, it was pretty clear that somebody had watched Beekman Boys that was on the show, because there was just so much overlap in the store and what they were building with their company. And when it was the final season, right before the final season, and Brent had the idea.
I wrote another letter. They were going into their final season, and we have been fans of the show from the very beginning. And in the beginning, it was on a very small network, Pop TV, and many people hadn't watched it. And so when I had done the reach out to say, "Oh, we want to do something," and basically my appeal to them was, again, trying to think what was in it for them. I said, you've been watching your show from the beginning. We love it. We love that it celebrates community, small community. It loves that it celebrates people's differences. And we just want to make more people aware of the show. So what if for it to celebrate your final season, we do this collaboration? Because at the time, with our, affiliations with QVC and HSN and whatnot, more people knew about our business than knew about their show. So we started working, on the collaboration. Well, then Netflix picked up their show and started running all the seasons. So then, of course, it exploded. And of course, they're much, much bigger than we are now. But that's really how it started. We reached out to them as a celebration, almost as a thank you for the joy that they had brought to our lives and their creativity. And then it ultimately, when they exploded, and then of course Rose Apothecary exploded, and it turned into a great thing for.
And you didn't sue them for like trademark infringement. They're very refreshing. So what's next then? Is a Rosebud Motel in your future?
I wish someone would open the Rosebud Motel. But no, now we're working. Well, the Rose Apothecary collection collaboration ends at the end of this year. And then we do have another big project in the works that hopefully we'll announce by the end of this year. But that again, our focus is always thinking of how it's going to help the other party involved, and or how it's going to help Sharon Springs, Schoharie County, upstate New York. We're always trying to think of projects that, even though they're certainly beneficial to our business, how is it going to help our community at large as it continues to grow?
I just want to take a second to acknowledge Luz and Susan, who said that we should say USA, not America. And I agree, and I apologize for that. And thank you for pointing that out.
I think for anyone who follows you on Instagram or whatever social media platform, one of the takeaways to me is joy and beauty, and like calm. You have a very hectic life. You live on a nice farm in a beautiful area, but it's a hectic life, and yet I never get that sense from watching anything that you're doing. You're promoting what you're doing, and yet you're celebrating a sunset or a flower, or it's like a graceful way to live. And what is the takeaway for you from everything that you've chosen to do in your lives?
Gratitude. I think that's the joy and peace we have, in the midst of, all of the, the company growth and things that we're doing. We are just so thankful for all of it. I think for me, that's my grounding.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, optimism, and, you create the community that you want to be a part of, and you put out into the world what you want to receive back. And so like you talk about, the types of imagery and things from the farm that we post, it's because we choose to find the beauty in things. And, some days it's harder to find the beauty, but we always try to go out and find the beauty and share that beauty. Because if you start your day with something beautiful, or, you smile at someone on the street, that creates this amazing ripple effect. And you have no idea the impact that those simple little things have on someone's life. And we get so mired in the stress, talking collectively, as a culture, society, that we get so mired in our own day-to-day stresses. And certainly we all have stresses, or we get so mired in the negativity that we forget that those really small gestures, those really small moments of kindness, those really small moments to appreciate something beautiful can have profound effects and profound impact. And so that's just how that's what we choose to put out into the world.
And that really hit home, I think, during the pandemic. We just taking walks on the farm and, seeing, the strawberries came back, the apples are growing, that this is happening. Like the world did not care that there was a pandemic, and something that was like so huge to all of it and causing so much stress. Of course, it's a horrible thing, but walking around this farm and seeing things go on, no matter how bad it is, things continue to go on, can be a really calming, perspective. Yeah.
And optimistic. Yeah.
And I think showing that to the people who follow you is also a gift. And I think one of the also things that comes across to me is authenticity. Like you are living your life, you are, showing your relationship, your love for each other, and expanding that to bring others into your world. And I think living authentically really speaks to people and it resonates with them. And so what you're creating there, or what you have created, is attractive to other people, you know? So I want to leave a couple of minutes to for questions. So I don't know, I have not been able to follow the chat. So I don't know, Elizabeth Brady, or oh, somebody's here from Sharon Springs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you actually have a real neighbor attending.
Yes, somebody, and Robin's mom lives in Schoharie County. So she's not used to hearing this voice reference. It's so true. This is this hidden jewel in the center of New York that nobody is aware of. It's amazing.
Well, I always like to say that there are hidden jewels everywhere. There are hidden jewels on your own street. You know, people always, you know, particularly back in the days when the Fabulous Beekman Boys was on, you know, the show created this, you know, kind of almost Mayberry-esque feeling to Sharon Springs, and people was like, oh, you're just so lucky that Sharon Springs was, you know, an accepting community and that there were all these great people there. And I'm like, well, there are great people in every community. You have to go out and find the neighbor and introduce yourself to the neighbor and find the gems and the treasures in your own community. You know, there's nothing particularly special about Sharon Springs. We just choose to highlight the, you know, the good things.
Well, I think two things come to mind. Is one, you didn't go there with judgment. Like, oh, I'm moving to Podunk and, you know, all these people are going to be conservative and, you know, they're not going to accept us. The other thing is you took in your neighbor. And, you know, if anything, that speaks volumes to everybody else who lives there, to say, here are these new people moving in who don't know anybody, and they just took somebody in, you know, and that ended up, you know, to your benefit, but it might not have, you know, so it was just a gesture of kindness that I think would show people in your community that this is, these are people who really understand and respect this community. So,
and yes, and it was, and it's been paid back just manifold. I mean, and I think that's the big lesson, is just those little acts of kindness are paid back in so many ways. It almost feels selfish, you know?
So I'm going to have to go find a neighbor that has goats. I apparently.
It helps.
So I am so thrilled to have had this chance. This was truly the highlight of my day and my week. I so enjoyed coming out to see your farm, but I have even more enjoyed this conversation and getting to know you. It's one thing to watch videos of you online, you know, but to really be able to have a conversation with you has been a true pleasure. And I think what you've just so demonstrated the words community and neighbor to all of us. And I want to thank you so much for participating in this. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend. I hope it gets cooler. And thank you again.
Well,
thank you. And thank you for all the work you guys are doing too. It is just so valuable and so important.
That's right.
Well, it's really nice to have partners like you, you know, who will work with us to help survivors. So thanks again.
You're welcome. And visit us in Sharon Springs, all of you.
We
Absolutely.
are so grateful.
The sweetgrass lotion is unbelievable. My favorite.
We are so grateful to Josh and to Brent and to Elizabeth Cronin, our moderator. I will just share, because Elizabeth talked about it at the beginning. Elizabeth talked about it, our two Elizabeths in our world, that when we started SUNY's Got Your Back, we would purchase the least expensive, frankly, lowest quality shampoo and soap and lotion we could afford. It was so small. It was run out of literally the back of my car. And then with Elizabeth Cronin coming on, and really Elizabeth Brady's leadership, connecting with Beekman and with the co-packer, in Cortland, New York, that every single one of 135,000, you can't see it from here, of 135,000 SUNY's Got Your Back comfort bags. That's where we're at since 2016. Every single one of them that comes out today has the dispensary, shampoo, conditioner, body wash, lotion, and the vegetable soap. And it's not just that you've done us an incredible service at the way you give it to us and the cost and the affordability, and we're grateful for that. It's the matter of respect, because you only get one of those bags on the worst day of your lives. And instead of getting the lowest quality that's out there, instead of getting the stuff you get at a budget hotel, you get the stuff that they have in the Waldorf Astoria and the like. And for us, that neighborly statement, that statement of respect, and the quality and the fact that it could be used on any type of hair and the like, that question of respect is just something that I hope flows through from your ethos to the program we're doing and out. And I hope it's a nice representation of the work we can do together. And we just could not be more grateful for your partnership and your friendship. Josh, Brent, Elizabeth Cronin, Elizabeth Brady, thank you for this incredible session.
Thanks, Joe. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
We will see folks in a half an hour. We have a great upcoming session on athletics. This is a cutting edge topic, trans students and athletics. Janet Judge has put together an incredible panel. Everybody take the half hour, get a drink, check your email, check social media, go take a walk around the block, and be back here at 4:30 Eastern and whatever time that is where you are. And we will be back with our panel, Trans Students and Athletics, cutting edge, hot topic, absolutely not one to miss. We'll see you all in about a half an hour.